Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and as promised, we are going back to Medicaid series, and we are going to be discussing Medicaid's role in regards to funding, regards to housing, and their partnership with HUD, and what the current cuts that are being proposed, how that may affect that situation as well. As you can see here, we're going back to a website we were taking a look at previously. It's from, I believe it was KFFC, and this is coming from MacPack, which we'll be going over. Now, this was done in June of 2021, but to be honest, folks, not a whole lot has changed between now and then, at least where this area is concerned, other than the continuous cuts, which make it more and more difficult for individuals like myself and our elderly to be able to get into things such as assisted living apartments, like those that are out in town in that place called Sassafras Apartments. Be a few less of us being able to get into programs like that. So we're going to be going over all of that, but first, just like we do usually with these videos, the quick disclaimer and the trigger warnings. So in this Medicaid series, every single article, every single blog, every single video, should we ever take a look at a video that we go over in regards to this series, you will find links to every single last one of them right there in the description box. I do that mainly because I don't think people should just take my word for things. I think individuals should be able to go into the description box and pull up that information and read it for themselves. So, it's always linked there. You're also going to find the link to what we're getting ready to go through here in just a moment in there as well. Feel free to click on those links. In fact, I definitely do encourage you very much to do so. Alright, now to the trigger warnings. Folks, we do have this channel marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity, and we do speak on some dark topics. So if your child is 16 and younger and watching this, parental supervision is advised. Also, in regards to politics, I am an equal opportunity offender, so to speak. Nice choice of words, especially with our current administration, I know. But if I don't have my dark humor to get me through these days, I'm not going to have nothing, and might as well go into the corner over there and rock back and forth like back in the day when I was like 11, 10 years old. Right? I mean, it's been a little bit nuts. So, you will not find me either standing for the Republicans or standing for the Democrats. In fact, I'm rather pessimistic in regards to both parties, in regards to how they treat individuals like myself. When they do address the problems in regards to people like myself and what we face, it is usually during election season. It's usually an individual who doesn't know what they're talking about. And it's usually lip service because they're trying to get the votes. And when they do get the votes, wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden they get a terrible case of selective amnesia. We're tired of being paraded out as pawns by both parties. Okay? Both parties have done nothing but let us down and never reach out to us unless it's to get votes. So, just know that in advance. I'll be right back. Thank you. Alright, sorry about that, folks. But yeah, they use us, they discard us, and they don't rediscover us again unless they need to use us as props or pawns again. So, if you are someone who is going to try and tell others, you must support this party, or you must support that party. Yeah. I'm not your girl on that. I'm going to still tell you to go ahead and take a look at the description box, but more than likely, you're going to be not just offended, you're going to be very offended. I have no filters. 40 years old, it's a little late to try and develop them now, so you've been properly warned in advance. Also, I will admit, this is amateur hour over here. I do not know how to edit these videos whatsoever. Hence why you don't see any of those kind of flashy, cool things you see on some other content creators' YouTube channels. I apologize for that in advance. But again, I'm limited on what I know how to do in regards to this particular area. I'm a whiz at PowerPoint and the different kinds of cool little codes to get sound effects and everything, but when it comes to this stuff, not so much. So please bear with me. We're doing the best we can over here, alright? Okay. So, let's get started. Medicaid's role in housing. The relationship between housing and health is well established. Poor housing conditions can worsen health outcomes related to infectious and chronic disease, injury, and mental health, and may also affect childhood development through exposure to harmful toxins such as lead. Individuals experiencing homelessness or housing instability, for example, difficulty paying rent or frequent moves, also have difficulty obtaining health care and managing complex health conditions. Welcome to being developmentally disabled in America, folks. Now, back in the day, when I first moved out and I was in my assisted living apartment, if I did not have that Section 8 waiver as a part of my overall treatment program, along with side Medicaid. And it does get kind of hazy there because that's a state by state thing in regards to how those two organizations interact, where funding goes from one area to the next. But you get my point. I did not have that. I probably would have been stuck at home and then forced to work inside a sheltered workshop. And folks, I've already made several videos on my views when it comes to sheltered workshops, so I'm not going to get into that subject today. Let me go ahead and continue on here. Data suggests that among those who are chronically homeless, the provision of supported housing, not increased access to case management or other outpatient health services, led to a decrease in emergency department use. Wouldn't you know it? If you don't have to fear being thrown out on the street, your life becomes a lot less stressful and a lot more manageable. Who would have thunk it, right? Medicaid and supported housing programs serve many of the same individuals, yet collaboration between the two has been limited in the past. As states focus attention on addressing social detriments of health, SDOH, however, Medicaid programs are increasingly collaborating with state and local housing authorities to assist beneficiaries in need of supported housing. Now, this is true even in the early 2000s, when that was kind of the big kickoff point where Medicaid and HUD started to begin to work a lot more closely together. Not just with the assisted living apartments that were already in existence, but also to begin to build more types of assisted living apartments to help individuals to be able to get into, coordinating all of that, making sure that there's ones that are open for those who are our wheelchair users and people with limited mobility. It's a pretty long list to make things very, very accommodating as humanly possible. And by the way, folks, renovating and making sure that these old buildings, especially in a city like mine, are compliant to be able to help with individuals who are mobility, who need help in regards to mobility, it's not cheap at all. That's why we've seen so much collaborations. The importance of such efforts has been underscored by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has contributed to housing instability and a growing recognition that communities of color are disproportionately affected by social and economic impediments to health. Now, out here, we got like an old hotel. It was out by my old call center job workplace called Protel. And there was a massive fire. Okay, so massive fire. They came in and renovated, and then one of the local churches got a hold of it, and they covered the cost of that renovation through both Medicaid waivers and assistance through HUD, and used that to help house the homeless out in the city during the COVID-19 pandemic. A good thing too, because it was getting very, very vicious in regards to the homeless of our city. They were not allowing these folks to stay anywhere. Folks found on the street, found themselves in jail, fined if you didn't have a mask when you're homeless. It wasn't good, folks. It wasn't good at all. So that happened. I'm thinking that's part of some of the things they are talking about there. Now, out here, we do have charities that interact with both Medicaid and HUD and can help at least a small amount with some of the funding. But with how the economy has done a nosedive and is now sitting like at the 8th circle of Dante's hell, we haven't quite got to the 9th yet. Yeah, even what the churches can do out here and Ozark's food harvest, all of that, it's getting stretched very, very thin, which makes folks more reliant on the funding that we already have access to. These cuts is going to put a lot of folks in, I hate to say it, it's going to put them in danger. Okay? Alright, let me go ahead and continue here. This issue brief describes how Medicaid programs pay for housing-related services. It begins by reviewing relevant sub-regulatory guidance issued by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also known as CMS, and the various federal Medicaid authorities under which states can cover housing-related services. It provides examples of how certain states braid multiple funding sources to provide supports for certain populations, and also discusses the use of health service initiatives under the State Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, to identify lead exposure and fund abatement. So, we are going to begin to go ahead and read through some of this here. And I need you to know, folks, as we're going through this is what's at risk. That's why we're going through this. This is what's at risk. Okay? And not just that as well. We will be taking in a little bit more look in particular directly on HUD as we continue to go throughout multiple different news series these days, because our government never sleeps. They have to spend every single second of their lives making ours more difficult. So, you know the saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? Okay. Federal guidance on use of Medicaid funds for housing. Medicaid programs can pay for house-related services that promote health and community integration, such as assistance in finding and securing housing and home modifications when individuals transition from an institution to the community. Kind of what I was talking to you about before, making it accessible to wheelchairs, things of that nature for someone like me. I had to go in and make sure that there was nothing pastel in that apartment because yeah, you don't want to see me if I'm surrounded like in a bright yellow room. It's my definition of the ninth circle of hell. However, Medicaid cannot pay for rent or for room and board except in certain medical institutions. Again, that depends. Out here, it's a bit more of a blurry line because Medicaid, HUD, and Supplementary Security Income, or SSI, work so close hand in hand together. A lot of us who go into those assisted living apartments, especially those of us in transition age services going from high school into the workforce or into secondary education, it's kind of a confecta. So, essentially, Medicaid approval came first for me. After Medicaid approval, then I got approval for HUD under Section 8, which meant the Section 8 gave me the waiver and the funding I needed to be able to get into the lease for my assisted living apartment directly out of high school. Right after that, because I had not been employed yet, I was just starting the job program through ARC. See what I mean when I say all of these are very knit closely to one another and work hand in hand out here. And I'm going to refrain from trying to use a very, very horrible analogy. I'm just going to laugh about it in my head, folks. Sorry about that. I'm going to spare you that because it's gross. Anyways, so they're kind of all married together. Medicaid came first. I got approved for HUD Section 8 and got into the assisted living apartment because I was actively looking for employment. I got assistance to get in for temporary food stamps while I was working on getting into community-based employment. And after my first year in the assisted living apartment, I was finally approved for supplemental security income. And so I began to get that coming in as well. So you see how all tightly knit this all is, right? Think about all those different services. Think about how much all of that costs if I was trying to do this somewhere else out of the money out of my wallet. Just saying. Okay. Let me go again and continue from here. However, Medicaid cannot pay for rent or for room and board, except in certain medical institutions. CMS guidance on housing-related services focuses on supporting approaches for providing housing-related services and supports, and ways in which states can reduce lead exposure for low-income children using CHIP HSIS. Alright, so resources to support the Olmstead implementation. This was a landmark case, folks. Back in 1999, Olmstead versus LC ruling. The United States Supreme Court held that the unjustified institutionalization of individuals with disabilities as a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. So, hey, Trumpers, your idea of forcing us against our will back into the back into getting institutionalized, violates ADA. Yeah, nobody ever thinks about that, do they? Well, it doesn't bother me. I don't have to deal with it. Do you age? Because if you age, at some point in time, you will become disabled. Which means, whether it's gonna happen sooner or later, it's going to affect you. So, I don't know, maybe check your bigotry in your ableist stupidity. And, maybe don't fight to have all this funding stripped from everyone so that when you need it, it will actually be there. Just say, I know you're a selfish bunch, so I have to put it in selfish terms so you understand you're not just costing people you don't like, you cost yourself too. Sorry, not sorry, folks. Under the ADA, people with disabilities are guaranteed equal opportunity to access all public programs, including the right to live in the most integrated setting appropriate to their needs. Medicaid supports community integration as the primary payer of long-term services and supports. In 2012, CMS issued an informational bulletin to states highlighting housing resources that can be used in coordination with Medicaid to support the Olmstead implementation, including the Section 811 Project Rental Assistance PRA program. I got in particular into Section 8, a lot of us out here have. I'm no longer a part of it. Oh no, rent comes entirely out of my pocket these days. I was very stubborn and stuck to my guns for 6 years. And now, I don't have to deal with it. But if I didn't have access to that at that time, I would be living a whole different kind of life right now. Way more restricted and isolated than what I am now. This program, run by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, provides integrated supported housing for people with disabilities. PRA funds are awarded to state housing agencies that set aside units in affordable housing developments. To receive PRA funds, state housing grantees are required to partner with state Medicaid programs to identify and refer low-income individuals with disabilities to PRA units and ensure their access to LTSS within the community. Now, housing-related services and activities. We're going to go through this a little bit briefly, and then we'll come back to this again next weekend. In 2021, CMS released a letter to state health officials describing circumstances under which Medicaid and CHIP funds can be used to pay for services to address SDOH, including housing-related services and supports. The letter supersedes the CMS Informational Bulletin on Housing-Related Services issued in 2015. It does not provide new flexibilities, but outlines how states can address housing and other SDOH under existing authorities. The letter describes housing-related services in 3 categories: home accessibility modifications, one-time community transition costs, and housing and tenancy supports. States can use a number of different authorities to cover these services, kind of like what I was talking about, where it's kind of all buried into one big blob. Alright, so housing-related service or support, home accessibility modifications. Give you the definition. So that's temporary or permanent changes to a home's interior or exterior to help beneficiaries remain in their homes. In particular, if you have someone who has just become a person in a wheelchair, they will come in and help you remodify the home so that you would have access to everything you need to without having to be moved into a medical facility. Examples include installing a wheelchair ramp outside the home, adding grab bars in the shower, enlarging a doorway to allow wheelchair passage. One-time community transition costs. This would be payment of expenses to establish basic living arrangements when beneficiaries transition from institutional or other congregate settings, homeless shelter, to a private residence. In my case, it would be moving from my aunts and uncles and into my assisted living apartment back in the day. Paying security deposits and utility activation fees, purchasing essential household furnishings. That one I did not get. More's the pity. More's the pity. My mom did, because my mom is awesome. But yeah, it still would have been nice. At least maybe some Clorox wipes. Anyway, sorry, just a moment. Allergies. Alright. Housing and tenancy supports. Pre-tenancy services to help beneficiaries transition to housing, and tenancy sustaining supports once beneficiaries are housed. So, we'll go over the examples here. Excuse me, a moment please. Blah. Things get caught in my teeth. Blah. Gross. Alright, so that would be like conducting a Senate screening and housing assessment that identifies the beneficiary's preferences and barriers related to successful tenancy, assisting with the housing application process and housing search, ensuring that housing units are safe and ready for move-in, assisting in arranging for and supporting move-in, including related transportation and moving expenses. Hey, why didn't you all help me? Poor parents had to do a good majority of that, and driving between Rogersville to where I was not a short trip. Anyways, sorry folks. Tenancy sustaining services, identifying and addressing behaviors that may jeopardize housing, leasing violations, education and training on the role, rights, and responsibilities of the tenant and the landlord, individualized case management and care coordination, which is something that I very much was involved in. That was literally the landlord, the head manager of my assisted living apartment, was part of my overall circle of support. The individuals that were included in with the person-centered planning treatment program that I have been in literally since the inception of me getting into the service system. Lead abatement. In 2017, CMS released a set of frequently asked questions on HSI funds that states can use to pay for certain public health activities, including lead abatement. Allowable lead abatement activities include removal, enclosure, or encapsulation of lead-based paint and lead dust hazards, the removal and replacement of surfaces or fixtures, which can include water service lines and other fixtures identified during an environmental investigation as lead hazards, the removal or covering of soil lead hazards, and training to ensure that there is a sufficient number of qualified workers to complete lead abatement activities. Now, this is not something that's very big in multiple states, but it is out here. Missouri was one of the major lead mining states from like mid to late 1800s into the 1900s. So the hazards are kind of everywhere in regards to lead contamination. So that really helps for those states like ours that really do need to have folks help us keep an eye on those type of things. Alright, we're going to we're finished up for now, starting in on HUD and Medicaid, what that all looks like, and how this can be affected by the cuts being proposed in regards to Medicaid from our current GOP. We will eventually get to HUD itself, because I've heard rumors about possible cuts there too. I haven't seen anything concrete, and I haven't seen anything in the news lately. It was something discussed towards the end of last year. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and close out, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, if you could, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please, folks, don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time, and as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely do hope you have a good one. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.